Every day, you essentially pay your dues by doing the harder thing when it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I think it really, really starts with education and culture from the beginning. So making sure that the parents, the athletes, and the coaches have access to the information and everyone is on the same page. Because nothing's more confusing for, a young gymnast when they're seeing one thing and then the parent is saying a different thing and then the coach is doing something different. But just having that education and making sure everyone is on the same page, just understanding the importance of it, right? The same way that we hold parents up to the expectation that, they're going to drive their kids to practice on time and the way that they present themselves and carry themselves when we show up to a meet. And again, we're not telling them exactly what to do. We're not telling them how to eat, but we're telling them that this is a part of the bigger picture, because really it's not the coach's responsibility.
Right.
When it comes to like nutrition, there is a dietitian that has done a lot of research in what they call the division of responsibility in feeding. I believe the dietitian is Ellen Satter. There's a ton of research, and they talk a lot about the responsibility in building healthy eating habits, really between like the child as they grow and as they age and the parent. But I think this model is really applicable to the gym and the gym situation too, because everybody has to be holding up their own end of the bargain. Everybody has to be playing their role and not really overstepping, because that's again when things start to get a little funky.
Mm.
Right? So as a gymnast, right, of course they've got to be invested in their ability and in responsibility. It varies by age.
Mm.
We can't expect a 6-year-old or an 8-year-old to be
Right.
taking full responsibility of food. We can't really even be expecting that of 16-year-olds, but they can do and handle a lot more.
Yep.
But it's clearly their job to accept food. It is their job to eat when they're hungry. It's their job to stop eating when they're full, to learn and grow and understand their body's signals, interpret their body's kind of biofeedback, what their body's telling them. That's really going to serve them through life,
Mm.
right? Getting in touch with their body and learning. That's what this time is for them. We've got to remember, even if they're, a 17-year-old elite gymnast, they're still a child.
Mm.
Right? Absolutely. Again, I really think it starts with education. If this is something that's been talked about in the gym before,
Mm.
whether it's, bringing somebody in on a regular basis, it's something that's been in the rule book that they sign, or the code of conduct, whatever you have at your gym,
Yep.
that they sign when they join the team, right? If it's something that's been in place from the get-go and it's part of the culture, it's much less of a tough conversation
Sure.
than if it's never been talked about at all and it feels like it's coming out of the blue.
Yep.
Um, I think for coaches, it is, like we said, they've got a ton on their plate, but at the same time, it is probably part of their role to have a basic understanding of not only nutrition for athletes and nutrition for children, to make sure that, anything that they're saying kind of lines up and isn't going to be harmful, but also to be able to pick up on those red flags.
Yeah.
Um, and I think the biggest role of the coach really is to be the eyes and the ears for trouble.
Mm.
So again, if that foundation is laid, the conversation is probably going to be much easier with the parent, than not.
Yep.
Than if that conversation hasn't happened before. If it's something that's never really been talked about in your gym before, but you do need to approach a parent. I mean, the same way I would say that you would approach a parent about any other issue, right? Their knees really been bugging them. I don't know if you've had a conversation with them or you've heard them talking about it, or, the same way that you would talk about, like you said, maybe like a move up, or just regular meetings, but just again, not talking about their body or their shape or anything like that, because that's not the direction. For gymnastics, I really like to keep it performance based, especially for a gymnast, right? That's kind of what they're most focused on. That's what they're really seem to be caring about. So just even saying, like you said, if I'm noticing their energy's not that great during practice, I'm noticing, right, they're a little bit sluggish when they come in. I've noticed, they're having a hard time keeping up in their strength compared to the rest of the group. And there are a couple reasons that this might be happening. And I think it's, worth a conversation just to see how they're stacking up with things like, their sleep, their stress, their nutrition. Because it doesn't have to be this big red flag. It doesn't have to be this big, scary topic. It's not something that, even if it's not an ideal situation for the kid, that the family has to overhaul their entire life, because that's what so many people think it is when you have the nutrition conversation, that they've got to go from, whatever they're doing to, meal prepping and cooking, 7 nights a week and only eating fruits and vegetables and never ordering takeout. But just, offering that support, or offering the referral. Like you said, for so long, nutrition, it seemed very like after the fact, like, okay, I'm already severely injured or I've already got some disordered eating. Let's backtrack. When it should be a preventative conversation. So we never get to that point in the first place. But, for these parents and these gymnasts, just having that conversation all the time of that gymnasts are unique. And I think the more exposure that we have to gymnastics, I think whether it's through television or social media, we really see this. Like, you watch an NCAA meet and you've got a variety of gymnasts that you can identify, that anyone could really identify with. So just having that understanding and that foundation that there's no such thing as a gymnast body, and you can do gymnastics looking any certain way. I think digging into the why is also really, really important. A lot of times you don't even get that surface level, right? You've got to ask why. I think, what is it, at least 3 times, if not 5 times, to really keep digging in and figuring out, okay, why am I not happy with my body? Why do I no longer like my stomach? Like, why am I thinking about changing the way that I'm eating? Like, what is the intention behind that? Because like I said before, a lot of times it actually has absolutely nothing to do with body image, and it has nothing to do with food, and it has, very little to do with nutrition. Not saying that it shouldn't be an important part of the conversation, but sometimes it digs a lot deeper into the mental health side of things. And that's more helpful than a nutrition conversation. And just figuring out why. Okay, like, why are you feeling this way? What are we really struggling with? What is the true problem we're trying to solve? A lot of times, overhauling nutrition doesn't actually solve the problem that you think it does, especially if you do it without professional help and you just think, okay, I'm going to give up sugar and eat clean or change my diet completely, right? It usually backfires. And then at that point, again, having the idea that you can work with a professional, that you don't have to know it all, even as a parent. Right? Your expertise is in parenting, and your expertise is in yourself and your family and your child. And a lot of times, like the gymnasts, they don't want to hear this from their parents. It sticks more, or they seem more motivated when it comes from somebody else. I've had that so much conversation with parents so many times, like that they say, I can't have this conversation with my kid anymore. Somebody else needs to do it. So bringing in that professional, bringing in somebody else that can have these conversations with your gymnast and be a neutral party, right? There's no conflict of interest, right? They're not invested. Of course, we want your gymnast to succeed, but we're not invested in, this meet this weekend. We're invested in happy, healthy humans, and we're invested in the long-term success and the health and well-being, not just physically, but mentally. So bringing in somebody, and then I think, with that professional, making sure you're setting realistic expectations for yourself. Again, that goes back to the body shape and the body image conversation, that all gymnasts are unique. And trying to fit yourself into a box that you're not meant to fit in is always going to do more harm than good.
Yep.
Yeah. Gymnasts, like, we like to think that they're robots, but they're not, right? We're all human, and having those realistic expectations set for yourself and giving yourself permission to be human. I think our gymnasts, again, so often they're holding themselves up to this perfectionist standard, right? Everything has to be perfect all the time, and if it's not, like, I don't know what I'll do. Or you start to see the wheels kind of fall off when things don't go exactly as planned. But living somewhere in the gray, right? It's not always black, it's not always white, but living somewhere in the gray is always going to get you further in the long haul. And we forget that in gymnastics because we're always striving for perfection. But especially when it comes to nutrition, right, there's no such thing as a perfect diet. And if somebody tells you they have a perfect diet, they're lying. Right? They're not telling you about the mental struggles. They're not telling you about the late night eating or the binges or what happens when they go to a party or on vacation and they can't obtain that standard again. Right? There's no such thing as a perfect diet. You are going to get further if you shoot for that middle ground, that like 80% most days. Right? After days and weeks and months, you're going to be further down the line than if you weren't 100% for 3 days and gave up.
Right.
You've always got to find realistic expectations. I'm really big on setting small goals and celebrating the little wins. Finding little things that work for you, and learning from the things that didn't go so well, right? You tried something and it didn't work. Okay, let's try something else. It's not the end of the world. You didn't fail. You can't fail at nutrition, right? You either try it and you like it and it worked, or it didn't and you try something else. I think the harm is much less outward. I think you're still going to go into gyms and see scales. There's still some of that, but it's much fewer and further between than it was even 10 or 15 years ago. I think the issue is it is a lot more sneaky, and it, like I was saying, the difference between common and normal. Some of the things may seem very, very common, whether it's in gymnastics itself or whether it's just in our culture in general, right? Diet culture's influence is deep. So, we're still hearing of gyms that have very strict food policies, right? No snacks during practice. If you've got a kid who's got a birthday, right, and they want to bring in a treat, they're only allowed to bring in like fruit tray, right? No cupcakes for your birthday. Nothing other than water. Still having to ask water for permission to get water in the middle of practice. These conversations of clean eating, eliminating foods and food groups, and being on certain diets, right? There's so much talk, whether it's from coach to coach, it's from parent to parent. It's going on in the gym, it's going on at home. The kids are hearing it, they're seeing it, and it's so commonplace in our culture that we forget that it's not normal, that all of that is actually very, very disordered. The food obsession, the elimination, the restriction, the cycle of guilt, and it's very, very disordered. It's still happening. It's still going on. It's just a lot more sneaky. I've heard everything from coaches saying, we only order small leotards, like size small. You have to fit into a size small. And it's like, that is unrealistic. Like, why are they have a range of sizes for these leotards for a reason. We don't question their height. We don't question their foot size, their eye color. Like, why are we trying to fit them all into a small Leo? I've even had gymnasts say things like the belly bands, that are meant for posture have been really triggering and was the start of a downward spiral, even as young as like 6 or 7. Just some of the words that we use, and again, it's not always intentional, but like, I've heard coaches say things like, suck in your gut instead of pull your ribs up. Like, very, very different phrasing can cause a kid to now become hyper aware of their body or things like that. So I think it's much sneakier, but it's definitely still there. It's definitely still pervasive. There's a lot more education within the community calling these things out and realizing like it's okay to allow your kids to have a snack in the middle of a 4-hour practice. Right? They're not going to be poisoned if they brought a Gatorade to practice. These things are okay. And as we have conversations, it becomes more and more okay, and more coaches are allowing these things and normalizing these things. And it's just got to continue.